Hello, hello. Welcome as we start a new series on living wisely with technology. Artificial intelligence, distractions, chaos. Technology is simultaneously exciting, distracting, helpful, and terrifying. We're going to unpack technology and apply biblical principles to it so that we can answer the following question: how then shall we live? Our plan is to start by laying a foundation for assessment over the next few weeks. Then we will turn to AI pretty heavily and other technologies, and we're going to apply our assessment, our standard to each of them. So let's get started. We don't typically say that a specific technology is evil in its nature. We don't say there's an evil, morally evil technology or there's a morally good technology. Well, we might, but we're using it as a shorthand. Because what we really mean is that technology creates good outcomes or that technology drives bad outcomes. You might say social media, okay, I might say social media is evil because of all the fighting you see on it. You might say that social media is good because you're able to stay in touch with people around the world. Your perspective is driven not by the inherent moral nature of the technology, but by how you use it or see it being used. So, for example, let's consider the simple camera. Uh, with it, a photographer could capture a tranquil lake set against the rugged mountains. Right? We might look at that photograph and give praise for the amazing creation that, for the amazing camera that allowed us to capture and share that image. It provides a morally good outcome, one in which we can rejoice in the amazing creation of our Creator. That camera alternatively could capture a morally objectionable image, um, an image of immorality. We see the photo and we hate the denigration of women that it represents. We hate the temptation it puts in our hearts. We loathe the camera that took the photo. A believer who seeks to capture God's creation to bring praise upon our King, would love the camera. It's their tool for bringing God glory. On the other hand, a believer who works to counsel and restore women who have been destroyed by the misuse of this technology might very well wish that all cameras were banned. And who could blame them? They see the broken, destroyed lives in front of them. Is the camera good or bad then? Well, we'd say neither. It's not moral in its nature or its essence. The morality comes in how it's being used. That's kind of an extreme, almost silly example, but let's look at another one: social media. When Facebook first expanded off of college campuses and to the world, folks were amazed. They could keep up with distant family, high school friends, and that random person you met at that thing many years ago. Right? Uh, People were also surprised to learn they had family members with some really weird or offensive political positions or ideas. Like, oh, I didn't know they believed that. Hmm. Amongst those who published their lives online, there became a trend to manufacture a false reality, a false narrative of their lives. My favorite critique of this is in the movie Jumanji: The Next Level. As they're introducing the characters, they bring you into one morning before school, the picture or um, the school socialite teenager, right? And you see her shaping her bed and getting on it and like setting her hair up in all the right ways. And she's taking this selfie and she's like, oh, that's so cute. And she publishes this obviously staged photo. Just woke up. charmed life. Hashtag charmed life. And you're like, yeah, okay. But it's true though, right? It's a joke to be funny, but it's funny because of the reality that all of these things are that this is what comes out of social media. Society began to discover that despite all the benefits of social media, and there's at least one or two, there are strong personal and cultural downsides to it. Social media measurably increases anger, fighting, and depression among people. So, where to begin? As author John Dyer writes, when we use a tool, in this case, a technological tool, but any tool, frankly, when we use a tool, the tool shapes us. It changes how we think and act. It changes how we behave, and therefore it changes our churches, our culture, our world. And so there's definitely a need here to ask these questions. How is technology changing us? Is it a good change? Should we embrace this change or should we resist it? How much resistance should we do? Is it just kind of be aware of it, or is it a real serious problem? We can't answer these questions without first establishing a baseline for which to compare, a standard by which we can assess things. So, for the purposes of this study, that baseline will be the Imago Dei, or the image of God in man. So, what is it? What is the image of God in man? Um, it's a tough question and one that has been debated for, well, thousands of years. We're going to spend several weeks exploring this idea, and so that we can come out with our ability to assess what it is and what relevance does it have for my life. So, what is it? Let's start at the beginning. In Genesis 1:26, it reads, "Let us make humankind in our image." This is God speaking, "and according to our likeness. And let them rule over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heaven, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every moving thing that moves upon the earth." In Genesis 2, verse 7, when Yahweh God formed man out of the dust of the ground, and he blew into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living creature. When we look at these two verses together, we see that after making everything else, Yahweh declares that he is one last act of creation, mankind. This wasn't going to be an ordinary act of creation, though. This new creation was going to be in his image. He doesn't just give Adam the breath of life when he says he gives the breath of life to the animals. He, it shows one doing CPR. He kneels down and he blows into his nostrils the breath of life. There's this personal touch. Something different is happening here. And this tells us two things. One, man is categorically different from the animals. Okay? Uh, there is a distinct and fundamental difference. Man has the image of God. Whatever that means, we see God taking very special and very different steps with mankind's creation. But that's not all we see. The Imago Dei is tied to ruling the earth. He says, "Let us make man in our image and have him rule the earth. Let him rule the animals, the plants, all of our creation." So there's some joining there that we have to wrestle with in our understanding of the Imago Dei. So let's dig in. Is it a physical attribute or set of attributes? In Genesis 5, verse 1, And this is a position that's been held throughout church history. Adam is said to have fathered a son, right? It says in Genesis 5:1, this is the record of the generations of Adam. When God created Adam, he made him in the likeness of God. And then two verses later, it says, and when Adam had lived 130 years, he fathered a child in his likeness according to his image, and he called his name Seth. So we have God creating Adam in his own image, and Adam creating Seth in his image, fathering Seth in his own image. That seems, for some interpreters, there's a connection there of physicality going on. In Genesis 9:6, when speaking with Noah, Yahweh declares murder to be wrong because all people are in his image. It says, as for the um, one shedding the blood of humankind, by humankind his blood shall be shed. The murderer shall be executed. For mankind is made in the image of God. You kill someone, you harm someone in the image of God, and you should be punished. There's not a distinction between the righteous Sethite line and any other lines. There's not a distinction being made here just for Adam or for Noah and his kids as long as they obey. All men are created in the image of God. James 3:9 reinforces this. James talking about our tongue, with it we bless the Lord and Father, and with it we curse people who are made in the likeness of God. Okay, so we have um again not a distinction of just within the church, but a distinction, but a statement about all people everywhere. In Colossians 1:15, the incarnate Christ is in the image of God, who it says is in the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. So we look at this and we see this lineage from God making Adam in his image, Adam having fathering children in his image, all people, even those who are anti Yahweh, those who reject him and would rather go to hell, they're all in God's image. And so some have said it must be a physical attribute. But we have a problem with that. And that is that God is a spirit and he doesn't have a body. He created Christ a body before the foundation of the world, but he is a spirit. And so, being in his image, we must have something like him, be like him in some way, and it cannot be physical. We have mental characteristics, right? Mankind is something special in our thinking capabilities. We have this general purpose intelligence that enables us to learn a wide range of skills. We think, assess, plan, and we develop new ideas and new ways to accomplish things. All these things are unique to mankind. This has led people to assess that the image of God is tied to mental characteristics. But let's explore some of this a bit, right? So, general intelligence would be a possible candidate for the image of God, right? That what it means. General intelligence is defined as the baseline intelligence of the average person. This includes the ability to walk and talk, learn new skills. The average toddler, they learn all of these things and so much more. You watch your child learn, it's amazing how fast they learn, both the physical, moving around, doing things, but also uh, everything else, the learning, the interacting with the world. It's really amazing. But animals also do that. Have you ever seen puppies or kittens learn to move around and become grown up? They go through the same process. It's different, right? Their general intelligence is not the same as the average intelligence of a human. It is the average intelligence of a dog, right? Or cat. Um, and they can learn a lot of skills. We taught a dog to ring a bell when it wanted to go to the bathroom, go outside to the bathroom. We see plenty of animals being taught things like addition, counting, colors. So I don't know if general intelligence is a good thing here to look at. But rationality and logic, right? That's exclusively the domain of humans, right? Yeah, it kind of depends on how you define it. And that's where all this gets really murky. If you focus on rationality and say the logic of a geometric proof or an algebraic expression, yeah, that's pretty clearly human level intelligence. But we still see animals can have rationality and logic. They can make some decisions. They even use rudimentary tools and they teach other animals to use the same tools. So, it's again, a matter of degrees. Some point to volitional will, and this is a lot more common than the first two. Volitional will is my ability to make a decision. Is that the image of God in man? Is that what differentiates us from the animals? But animals tend to respond on instincts, while we have the ability to say no to our desires. We can choose to live or die for an ideal, freedom, patriotism, protecting family. This is categorically different than the animals. But we still see animals protect their young, defend children that they see a dog, right? It'll protect the kids or the family that it has defined as its under its care. That's not, I mean, that is some level of volition, right? Sentience, the ability to be self-aware. Most famously, this is articulated by Rene Descartes in his when he writes "Cogito ergo sum," or I think, therefore I am. But note, he's completely wrong. He should have written, "God created me, therefore I am." Are animals self-aware? Do they think about themselves as an individual? Can they assess themselves against others? Answer is probably not. Certainly not in the way that we do. They seem to have some level of awareness, but how much? It's very limited. All of these things become this sliding scale, like this number line in which different animals are at different places, and then the average people are up at a different end of the spectrum of the scale. One last one. Let's talk about communication skills for a minute. This is where we differ. Again, we differ again in many, many interesting ways. It's true that animals communicate in some amazing ways, and with some level of nuance. But despite that, their communication tends to be blunted expressions of their desires or fears. They don't have the ability to write amazing lines like "it was a dark and stormy night." Yes, I know the rest of the sentence went off the rails, but it started beautifully. So evocative. I love it. They also they can't speak words of love like Shakespeare could, or pen lines such as "we hold these truths to be self-evident. All men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Such amazing lines to found a country on. Our speech can be gentle or harsh, kind or cruel, tender or insensitive. We can use our words to build up or tear down, be snarky or witty, or attempt or tell dad jokes, or attempt any other lesser form of humor. Our words can express the salvation of God or drive people away from their Savior. While animals are full of physical expressions, They still tend to communicate general emotions like happiness, boredom, fear, grief, hunger. With people, these expressions aren't simple. We have a wide range of expressions for every emotion. Further, our clothing choices can communicate a lot, right? They can say that we're obsessed with our personal image, that we live a casual life, or that someone really should teach us how to match styles and colors. Uh, in all its forms, our speech can be beautiful, creative, messy. Words can be added to the lexicon and are, enriching our communication. So, does this qualify as the Imago Dei? Does communication stand out as our um, the differentiating factor? Um, Not really. The image of God is unique to us, and animals also can and do communicate. So, is it anything mental? Is it a collection of all these mental things? No, and not just because all the animals can do all these things. I mean, when you start putting it in something, whether it was the physical or here in the mental characteristics, you run this sliding scale. Again, did you have an animal that's super smart and suddenly it has the mental character, it crosses some line and becomes in the image of God? Well, no, that's absurd. Um, and so it can't be that, right? Um, and I go a step further. It can't be a mental characteristic because not all humans have these skills. Now, we have general intelligence. Generally speaking, everyone has an average level intelligence. A little above, a little below, some extremes, but not everyone has these skills. Um, Consider, if you will, an embryo. It's still in the image of God. This is why abortion is wrong. But it can't do any of those things that we just considered. And yet it still has the image of God. So it's not physical, not exclusively physical. It's not mental. Is it our soul? Throughout church history, this has been kind of where people land in a lot of ways. We have a soul that's eternal, it's special. God died for our soul, right? Talk about our soul and spirit. If we were to go no further, this is a great spot to land. You might say, this is where I was raised, this is what I believe. Great, not a problem. My struggle with just simply saying our soul is that the word for soul is used interchangeably with the soul of animals. When God says breath of life, it's the same expression when he says he gave breath of life to the animals. When he says they destroyed all that had the breath of life on the earth during the flood, that was people and animals. When says throughout the Old Testament, it talks about the soul of man and we get the soul of the animal, and it's the same word. Is our soul different? Absolutely, 100%. We have a different kind of soul. It is not the same thing. But I think there's a better way for us to approach this. Something that acknowledges all of these things that we are categorically different, whether it is in our physicality, it is in our intellect, it is within our soul. There is a better way to see all of these. And that is that it's not. a specific trait or collection of traits. It is who we are. It's what we do. We image God and we reflect Him to the world. I take this position, the position that is espoused in the Lexham English Bible Dictionary, Lexham Biblical Dictionary. This, we are all of those things. We are intellectually different, physically different, spiritually different. But as we saw, that there's difference between God and us on some of these things. And animals have that. So it's the collection of all of that paired with what we do with our lives. We image God, we reflect into the world. It is absolutely tied to our actions, um, but it is not solely our actions. Let's consider for a minute John 14:8. Philip says to Christ, Lord, show us the Father, and it is enough for us. And Jesus responds to him, am I with you so long a time, and you have not known me, Philip? Don't you know? You've met me, right? You know who I am. The one who has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say to me, show me the Father? You saw me. And if you saw me, you saw the Father. Think about that for a minute. Remember, Colossians 1:15 says that he is um, the image of the Father, right? It said, who is the image of the invisible God. So in his flesh, he is imaging God. He is the Word. What we see going on here then is um, when we want to think about the image of God, we have to start with Christ and who he is. Because that's what he said. You see me. Um, in our churches, we talk about reflecting Christ, and by that we mean that we live an upright life, lives that obey his commands. That is correct and good for us to do. And yet, if we stop there, we do not have a complete picture of the image of God. And I know some of you are going, wait, what? Excuse me? Back up here a minute. Yeah. Okay. Two reasons for this. Okay. First, obedience to the Father is not the sole factor in imaging God. When we talk about imaging God, we are supposed to obey. That isn't just don't lie, be kind. You remember when Paul said to, if you don't work, you don't eat? There's this, there are other aspects that are going on in here. Adam and Eve were created in the image of God, and that was paired with ruling over the world. That has to be part of it. And we don't see that in well fleshed out in the New Testament, particularly in the Gospels. That's not the strong emphasis, right? That's not what we're focused on. And that's our second reason. The Gospels do not give us a complete picture of Christ. Nor should they, right? They don't detail his work as a carpenter prior to his ministry. They don't teach us about the non-ministry parts of his public life. When he's in ministry, he wasn't preaching all the time. He wasn't ministering every minute of every day. He and his disciples went off into another country for a while and were he was teaching them. What did he do? What was he like? Did he prepare food? How did he help? What things went on? How did he image God outside of obeying and preaching the word? John tells us that he doesn't write everything down. There's not enough books in the world to contain it all. So when we think about the image of God and we start with Christ and we look at him, it is correct. Remember, the Gospels are focused on the Christ mission, which is to rescue your soul from hell. The rest of the New Testament is expanding what it means to say no to your sinful nature. We're going to start, we're going to take that, which we should do, but we are going to pair it with some other aspects of the image of God that we find throughout Scripture. And our result is we're going to talk about over the next 3 weeks these aspects to the image of God. The caveat here is that these are a little bit arbitrary. Not, certainly not totally arbitrary, but you could say, I want to break them up a different way. I want to consider it, I want a fourth one. I want something different. Okay. This is how I am, for the purpose of our ability to assess technology, this is how I'm assessing things. And and before I walk through these, I want to say this. I am convinced that technology, as a technologist, as somebody who works in technology, I am convinced that technology is shifting how we view the image of God, and not always in good ways. It's not just about, am I being kind on the internet, somebody on my social media post. There's a lot more going on here that we need to dig into that has a strong impact on the image of God. So we have the moral side of it. And we'll dig into this in depth next week. But there is righteousness, right? Christ came to teach us righteousness, to show us what it means, and to live a life of fully righteous person with no sin. So we're going to start there. But we're also going to see worship as part of the image of God, the moral characteristics of the image of God. Because worship is not a natural, like, animals don't worship. There's something different about us and how we worship and what worship should look like. There's beauty, one of those things that completely boggles the mind of the evolutionist, the naturalist. How can beauty exist? Grace, patience, kindness. If you're thinking, well, that sounds an awful lot like the fruit of the Spirit, well, yeah, there's a reason for that. And I'm being selective here. We could go into all of them and try and take them all with us into the discussion of technology. But for the sake of time, sanity, we're not going to pull them all with us. We're going to bring some. Relational. When God says to go multiply, there's this implication in Genesis of the setting up of the family. And from there, civilization, communication among people, leadership, all of these things roll up into this idea of relationships and how we interact at the horizontal level. Uh, Also vertically with God, but we're putting that in the moral category. So that's our vertical standards on how we do things and how we think about the world. Relational is that go forth, get married, have a family, build society. And that's something that technology has a massive impact on how our societies live and function. So technological changes disrupt society, scatter how people live, from nomads to building cities to moving out of the cities. It's all interrelated. Functional. Uh, he says to rule over the animals, right? This brings with us work, creation, maintenance. Technology is influences all of those things, and how that technology shapes us reflects how we allow it to shape us, reflects our understanding of the image of God. We're going to wrestle with things like, is this new technology the difference from a horse and plow versus a tractor? Or is it something different? Is it just the next stage of a tractor? Or is it undermining? Is that next step going to undermine the image of God? We're going to wrestle with these things. There's not always clean, simple answers, but we are going to do our best over the next few months to work through these and understand technology and take that understanding and apply it. Look at this image of God and ask ourselves, in my life, in my home, how do we bring and utilize that technology to grow and develop the image of God? And by that, we mean to enable us to better image, to better reflect the God who is there. Does that technology help me refine in my moral character aspects? Does it boost my relational aspects? Does it help me be more functional as I image God? Remember, even the wicked do these things, right? These are all aspects. They do them badly, they do them in ways. Sometimes they use this image of God to denigrate God, but they are still imagers. And when they create art, they are imaging God. When they are raising a family, they are imaging God. When they choose to do something of beauty and grace, or they choose kindness, when they choose to steward the earth, they are they are imaging God. So join me as we begin to work through technology, and we build for ourselves a framework by which we can assess whether or not technology is helping us do, uh, helping us bring, refine, develop, grow the image of God in our lives and the lives of our families and our church.